order and begin with the approval of the minutes. Council members Lawson and Zvonek, do you have anything to approve the minute?
I approve them. I have no changes.
Yep, same.
All right, item 3A, who is Aurora?
Good morning. This is Danielle with the Planning Department. Allow me a minute. I'll pull up our presentation. Okay, I presume everyone can see that. Good morning, committee, council members, others in attendance. Daniel Krasnowski, the Planning Department. I am joined by Andrea Barnes, also with our Planning Department, to provide to you this sort of short overview of data and demographics and a little bit of information about the Who is Aurora report. This is a report that the city puts out periodically to take a look at really sort of our resident demographics, who lives in Aurora, what are their, what are the characteristics, where do they live, growth, et cetera. And we are in the process of updating this for the first time since 2016, but wanted to provide you all with a glimpse into a few of the data points that we've been able to pull together on a few topics. The report itself is divided up really kind of into three sections about population, housing, and employment, and we'll show some highlights from each of those sections. We'll share with you a few other sort of data and demographics resources that are available to council, to the city, to the community, and of course be happy to answer any questions at the end. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Andrea Barnes to kick us off with that first section.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to go over the population portion of the presentation. Yeah. All right. So this first slide shows Aurora's population growth over the last 10 years. So these 2010 and 2020 estimates are from the decennial census, while these in-between numbers, 2015 to 2019, are from the American Community Survey. On average, Aurora has added about 5,000 people per year, but one of our biggest jumps was from 2019 to 2020, where we added about 17,000 people, and that was a 4% population growth rate. Aurora continues to grow, in between these ACS estimates that Census puts out. The city likes to calculate its own internal population estimate. So in 2022, the Planning Department, along with data from Public Works and the help of IT, we calculated the 2020 estimate, and that was about 398,000 people. So we're getting really close to that 400,000 number. This pie chart on the right shows, is just a good reference to show how much of Aurora's population makes up that metro area population. So the entire Denver, Aurora, Lakewood metro area is about 2.9 million people, and Aurora makes up about 13% of that at that 386 number. This next slide goes into our racial and ethnic composition for the city. A lot of the times these are used interchangeably or incorrectly, but they are two different categories that the census reports on. So racial composition kind of shows, it explains like a person's physical attributes. So kind of like skin color or the way they look on the outside, how you present it to people, whereas ethnicity is kind of how groups of people identify to each other based on language, culture, nationality, religion, stuff like that. So on the left side, you can see 58% of Aurora's population identifies as white. And that number has, gone down in the last 10 years. In 2020, that was about 63%. So it's gone down by 5%. And these are other categories, Black, some other race, two or more races, etc. These numbers will probably change or tend to fluctuate in the next, coming surveys, since, the census will evolve and its racial categories are going to be changing as well. And just how people identify themselves ends up changing too. This chart on the right talks about our ethnicity. While there are many different ethnicities around the world, the census only reports on the Hispanic and Latino ethnicity. So about 30% of Aurora residents identify as Hispanic or Latino, and that's a bit higher than the metro area, which is about 23%. So that is our racial and ethnic composition for the city. This is a cool little dot density map that I had made to kind of show that racial composition geographically. So 1 dot equals 10 people. This is a little hard to see on the PowerPoint, but every color is for a different race. So these dots don't identify specific locations of individuals or households, but it's kind of cool to see kind of concentrations of races for the entire census tract since it's a random dot placed. So the tracts with the most mix of colors are most diverse neighborhoods. So, Aurora is known for its neighborhood integration. So this map kind of shows that geographically, so people are able to see it that way. Next, we're going to get into some data on our foreign-born population. So the Census Bureau collects data on all foreign-born individuals that participate in its surveys. About 20.6% of Aurora residents identify as being foreign-born. This chart that you're seeing now on the map is the number of Aurora residents and their country of origin for 300 and over residents. So as you can see, Mexico is our most common place of birth for Aurora residents, about 30,000, but some of our other, more common places of birth are Ethiopia, Vietnam, El Salvador. But yeah, this map kind of just goes along with that ethnicity chart and that racial diversity where you can see some of the concentrations where, a lot of our population identifies as Hispanic or Latino. And this foreign-born population map is similar to that racial diversity map that I had just shown. So again, 1 dot for every 10 people. And this is by census continent categories. Americas refers to Central America, South America, and Canada. So you can see there's a concentration of those individuals in Northwest Aurora. Here is a bit of information about the educational attainment for this city. So this is educational attainment for the population 25 years and over. About 30% of Aurora residents have received a bachelor's degree or higher, which is slightly lower than the metro area. They're about 45%. But our number has grown over the last 10 years. In 2010, it was reported that only 23% of Aurora residents received a bachelor's degree or higher. So we are making progress on that. And then lastly, I wanted to get into a little bit of our veteran population data. Given Aurora's history, I thought it'd be good to include some of this, with our Fitzsimmons campus and the new Veterans Affairs Medical Office that opened recently. About 23,000 of Aurora residents are veterans, and that's 8% of our total population, which is slightly higher than the metro area. They're about 7.3, and the state of Colorado is, I think, 8.4%. So we're on track with that. Our veteran population is mostly made up of veterans that served in the Vietnam Wars and also the Gulf War. The entire Who is Aurora report will go into more detail on the veteran population. It gets into our racial and ethnic composition. About 10% of veterans are identified as Hispanic and Latino. 89% of those veterans are male. I'll also go into income, educational attainment, and a bunch of other things. So there's more detail there, but those are just some of the quick highlights on population that we wanted to give. But the entire report will go into language data, age and gender. There's a lot of stuff, a lot more maps and things too, but this was just kind of a quick highlight on population for now.
Great, thank you, Andrea. The next section is related to housing and the city's housing stock. To no one's surprise, Aurora has grown and continues to grow. We continue to build homes throughout Aurora. And the graph on the left shows those housing unit totals over time, especially over the past 4 or 5 years. We've seen just really extraordinary growth in housing development, and I think we anticipate to continue to see that extensive residential development. The graph on the right shows some characteristics, sort of what types of housing units those are. As you can see, Aurora's listed in the red, the metro area is listed in the gray. For both Aurora and the metro area, most of our housing is single unit, either detached or attached. About 2/3 of our units fall into that category. But we do have housing that sort of falls into these other categories, 2 to 9, 10 to 19. These are things like small apartment buildings, small fourplexes. If you've heard the term missing middle, a lot of those types of housing fall into these sort of small attached unit categories. And then the 20 or more units probably represent some of our larger sort of apartment complexes and apartment buildings that you see throughout the city. And of course, mobile homes make up about 2% of our housing stock. This graph shows housing unit age, the decades in which the homes have been built. As you can see, between 1970 and 1989 were our largest production decades. In each of those, there were over 35,000 units built. Those homes are starting to be 30, 40, even 50 years old at this point. And so what that might suggest is, the need for continued investment by homeowners in their homes and by the city to support some of these aging and established neighborhoods to make sure that the housing stock continues to be quality and continues to meet the needs of residents even 40 or 50 years old. At the sort of bottom of the chart, you can see we've continued to grow by tens of thousands every decade. Over the past 10 years or so, we've built almost about 20,000 housing units, and like I said, we expect that to continue. This map shows the locations of new housing units that have been built between 2015 and 2021. You can see concentrations in Southeast Aurora over those years. Sort of the Central East and Northeast have seen growth sort of in the 2020, 2021, and currently. But what this map does show is that there's housing development throughout the city. East and Northeast and Southeast are not the only places where there's homes being built. In a lot of cases, sort of in that established core of the city, these are either small infill subdivisions, potentially redevelopment of apartment complexes, and that type of housing development. This slide shows the median home value according to the Census Bureau for Aurora, which is the red line, and the metro area, which is the yellow line. Aurora does lag the metro area in terms of home value. That difference is pretty consistent over the past 10 plus years. As you can see, those home values for both Aurora and the metro area have grown pretty significantly and continue to grow. We found some information from resources like Zillow and Redfin that show that the sales price of home, the actual sales are in the 450 to 500,000 for homes in Aurora in the last year, and this has been a growth of, like, depending on the estimate, 3% year over year, up to even 10% year over year. So those prices have continued to grow over the past year. We'll see what the future holds in terms of the housing market, but this is definitely something that's sort of on the forefront of a lot of people's minds, especially people who are buying homes or trying to rent homes. This shows the types of households, the individual families that live in Aurora. As you can see on the graph on the left, Aurora has sort of a larger proportion of its households are 3-person and 4-person and larger. This may not be a surprise given the number of families or extended families that call Aurora home. In fact, our average household size is about 2.83 people, which is larger than the metro area and larger than the average in the state of Colorado. The third section of the report touches on employment. And I did want to draw the distinction that the data shown here and in the report is Aurora residents, where they work, how they work, their household incomes. This data does not reflect Aurora-based jobs. We have that data, and that's something that we provide to different projects. And if we certainly get into looking at economic development or economic growth, we can bring those resources out. But this is about people who live in Aurora and the characteristics of their employment. So this graph shows employment by industry. This is different economic sectors. As you can see, Aurora in yellow, the Denver metro area in gray. We have our largest concentrations of employment in education and healthcare, professional, scientific, and management services, as well as retail, trade, construction, accommodation, food services, and then down the list. In some of these categories, Aurora has a slightly smaller proportion of its residents work in these industries, like the professional, scientific, and management. But in some categories, like retail, trade, and construction, we have sort of a larger proportion of our residents working in those industries than metro-wide. Another way to look at employment is by occupation. This is sort of the character of different jobs that are held by Aurora residents. As you can see, probably the largest distinction between Aurora in yellow and Denver Metro in gray is in that management, business, science, and arts occupations. About a third of Aurora residents work in this occupation, which is lower than the metro-wide average of about 46%. In all of these other categories like service, sales, production, and transportation, Aurora has a slightly higher proportion of its residents working in those occupations. This shows the median household income for Aurora in green and the metro area in black. Again, Aurora is lower than the metro average. Even as household incomes have grown over the past 10 plus years, Aurora has continued to track that pretty consistently over the years. Aurora's household income is about 82% of the metro area average, to give that perspective, and that's been pretty consistent over the past decade or more. It's another way of looking at household income by different income brackets. The graph shows that Aurora in those income brackets lower than $100,000 a year has a higher proportion of its population earning in those categories, whereas those categories above 100,000 and especially above 125,000 a year, Aurora has a much smaller proportion than the metro area averages. And finally, this data is intended to sort of look at the flow of workers from Aurora and to Aurora, and I'll sort of explain how this data is put together. About 113,000 workers are employed in Aurora but live outside of Aurora, while about 138,000 workers live in Aurora and leave the city for work every day. That's about a net outflow of about 25,000 workers every day. I think in a metro area, given that people live and work throughout the area, that's sort of not totally unexpected. But what I think that does show is that Aurora has a very talented workforce that leaves in a lot of cases throughout the day to find employment elsewhere. And so I think that probably represents opportunity for Aurora to continue to attract employers to where their employees and their talent lives. And it certainly has implications as far as economics and taxes and transportation issues and so forth. That balance between inflow and outflow has a lot of ramifications. And this is I think, a really interesting sort of topic to look at in terms of economics and other sort of policy and infrastructure issues. Just the last couple slides. All of this data we've been showing has been sort of citywide data. In the report itself, we do have some small area geographies that we break out and provide some of this data for. These were really selected based on areas of growth. These are the areas that we get inquiries about for data and information on pretty regularly. You can see them on the map here: Southeast, Northeast, and the Eastern Plains. Those are our quickly growing areas. These are of interest to developers, business community, retailers, et cetera. And then those areas like Havana Corridor. I know this group has discussed planning and so forth around Havana Corridor, which is a really important transportation and commercial area. Northwest Aurora, sort of the original Aurora area, there's a lot of growth and development and interest, as well as the I-225 corridor, where there's our light rail transit-oriented development and a lot of development opportunities as well. So those are broken down in the report. We won't go into them today. And so to sort of sum up, I wanted to kick it back to Andrea to kind of talk about some of the other data resources that the city and our department has available to council members, to the public, and others. And then we'll be happy to answer questions after this.
So Aurora and the planning department has several interactive maps, online maps on our map gallery on the website. So we have a demographic map that pulls the most recent ACS data and kind of goes over those population points that I talked about at the beginning of the presentation. We also have a certificate of occupancy map that shows COs over time throughout the city, and just a bunch of other maps related to housing, property information, and commercial development and development applications that we have going on. We also have the data and demographics website that I manage. So as soon as new ACS data is released, I will update the website with most recent data, and that's on these same categories that we presented on today. So people, housing, and economics. The data services group in the planning department also manages some major residential and non-residential project maps. So we update those twice a year, showing progress of development, both residential and commercial. We also have the City of Aurora fact sheet, which I put out every year. So that is kind of just like a major highlight on all those topics that we talked about today. And that's on the data and demographics webpage and is available publicly to everyone. And then lastly, the data services group in the planning department is constantly helping others with their data needs and their mapping needs. So you can always contact Daniel or myself or the rest of the team to get, any other data that you might need that goes, dives a little deeper and not just some of that, high level stuff that we presented on today.
So that concludes our presentation. We're happy to field any question or comments from the committee.
And Councilmember Jurinsky, if I may, very briefly.
Yeah.
Janine Restad, Director of Planning and Development Services. Thank you for allowing us to share this preview. Your input is very important as we finalize this report and refine it. We want to make sure we're including data that helps you as our policymakers. So any input is, again, appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. Do my colleagues have anything?
I do. If Councilmember Lawson, do you have anything, Councilmember Lawson? Otherwise, I just
You can go first.
okay. Thank you. One comment, and this I know that we're going to have a conversation in January, so I guess this is for staff in some ways on the winter workshop about an economic development strategy. When I look at that worker inflow outflow chart, I think that's something that we should bring up as a long-term vision for the city. It should be our long-term vision to try to change the dynamics of that worker inflow outflow to where we're having more. And I'm certain that if we looked at Denver, and I don't know what the numbers are, but they probably have a much greater number of inflow than outflow. And I think for a city to be a thriving driver of economic development, having that flipped and having more people come into the city because we have jobs here should be something that we should strive for as part of that long-term economic strategy. So that's my comment. And then a question I have on one of the slides, it talked about the types of housing, and I think it was in the high 60s for single family units. And you might not have this information right now, but something I'm just curious is how that compares with other states. One of the conversations we had with our state priorities is the challenge that Colorado has because of construction defect laws. And I wonder how much that impacts it, because when you talk about that missing middle, this was one of the things that we talked about and as a priority of saying, hey, look, there are people who aren't getting into townhomes and different types of multifamilies that they could buy because of our outdated and frankly, trial lawyer friendly construction defect laws that are actually consumer unfriendly. And just curious as to what those national numbers look like relative to Colorado. And again, if you don't have it right now, that's fine. Just something I think would be interesting to have at some point.
Yeah, I think both of those data points are of interest. I think the worker inflow outflow is something we can dig into a little deeper and see if we can bring that to bear for that January discussion and beyond. That really has real effects on things like economic development, job growth, job attraction, transportation, and so forth. So we can certainly do that, and we're happy to dig into the numbers about the housing as well. I think Aurora sort of being a suburban form, sort of not surprised to see a lot of single family homes, but we can do some comparisons between other metro areas, other communities throughout Colorado or throughout the country. So we'd be happy to dig a little bit into that as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lawson?
Thank you. So I agree with Councilmember Zvonek. I think that, although Aurora has, we have the hospital and the bioscience, I think one of the reasons why a lot of influx is in Denver is because of the variety of jobs that they have. That's multitude, that we don't have in Aurora. So a lot of people do influx there because the job market is kind of more focused on certain areas, and it's not really variety. So I definitely think that we need, especially as policymakers, we need to definitely look at the economic development that we're bringing in, because if we're going to have this diverse population, not everybody is in bioscience or medical or Boeing. A lot of people work in different fields, and that's why they head to Denver and other surrounding areas, because they offer those opportunities, even at DTC. So I definitely think that that's really important, and that's really a gap. One other gaps that I did see that I think that the city of Aurora should look at is also looking at our older neighborhoods. I think since I've been on council, there's been a lot of focus on the growth and Southeast, and that's really important. But I don't think there's been some work on doing infill projects and things like that. But like where I live at in Ward 5, we're still kind of developing. We're still kind of, we have some things, but we don't have a lot. So I just think that there should be some focus on different things in terms of not only just housing, but what we're actually putting in these neighborhoods. And I don't think that there's been so much focus on that side of town, but not really the inner core. And I live in the older part of, the area. So that's why I'm kind of focused on that, and think that there's been some gaps there as well. And then lastly, I would like to look, I'm glad that you're going to connect the transportation to the actual, I guess, employment, because I think that that's really important as well. A lot of people, especially, younger people, maybe that's why they do venture out to other areas and cities, because of the transportation grid, which is something that I've also been, trying to make sure that we have proactively, because we are growing as a city. So thank you for the presentation though, but those are my comments, and then just maybe recommendations that it looks like you're going to move forward with, but just some additional information.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman.
And then I have a couple of things. Your data that you've collected on workers in Aurora, so it looks like roughly the total you came up with is 291,000 workers. You said 113 live outside of Aurora but work in Aurora. 138,000 live in Aurora, and then the 40,000, what was that? Was live in and work in.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, about 40,000 live and work here in town.
138,000 don't work in Aurora.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So the 138,000, so the 100, so you, by your calculations, 153,000 workers in Aurora.
Yes, yeah, the 40,000 that work here, the 138,000 that live here but leave for work. Yeah.
Yeah, meaning they don't work in the city. They live in Aurora but don't work in the city. So your
Right.
numbers are 113,000 and 40,000. So 115. Your numbers are 153,000
Right.
employees.
Those that influx and those that live here.
So 153,000 workers that you've calculated in this city, how are you getting those numbers? Is that just basically wages turned into the city? How are you coming up with that?
The data source for this is the U.S. Census Bureau. They have a pretty extensive and complex database that tries to tie sort of your place of residence with your place of business, and I believe that's sort of reported through, I think it's through IRS records, and they do the calculations to provide these inflow and outflow numbers, and that's what we're reporting here is based on Census Bureau calculations.
Do you have any idea if the Census Bureau is taking into account people with multiple jobs?
That's a good question. We could look deeper into their methodology and see the extent to which that might affect those numbers. Yeah, I don't know if this includes, I presume it would be, people who file taxes, the IRS and so forth. But if there's people who are mixing job locations, we can certainly try to find that answer.
Yeah, there's more I want to say to that, Daniel, but I don't want to give away too much about what I'm going to say Monday night. So I will just circle back with you on that. But also something that I noticed, some of the highest industries that we're seeing, construction, the service industry, those aren't necessarily industries that require a bachelor's degree. But yet we did data on how many bachelor's degrees in higher education we have in Aurora. But actually, I would like to see, how many trades licenses we have in Aurora. For me, it's not bachelor's degree or no bachelor's degree that describes our level of education in this city. For me, I would like to see how many trades licenses we have. I think that would be more along the lines of the demographics in this city rather than just bachelor's degree and no bachelor's degree.
Sure, and that topic of sort of the workforce and their education or training or certifications is, I think, a really critical one, as we continue to talk about job growth or economic development, and we'd certainly like to dig into that a little bit about what certifications or training or licenses people hold, and those opportunities in the city for continuing to connect our workforce with those training opportunities. So yeah, appreciate that comment.
And then I think that's all I have. If my colleagues don't have anything else on this topic, we will go ahead and move on. So thank you, Daniel, for this.
Member Jurinsky.
Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem has something.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Just on, is there any way to track retail establishments in terms of those that leave and those that come into the city? Because we have our retail division, and I was just wondering if that was something we could track.
Yeah, I'd probably defer to Bob Oliva on the data that he's been able to collect on whether it's licenses or otherwise about retail establishments coming and going. So I don't know
And
Well,
by
all of
categories.
that, but he could certainly provide a lot more insight into that.
We do track the businesses coming into Aurora. We have tried to track the businesses that are closing and or leaving, and there's sort of a lag on when people actually stop paying for their licenses. So we're having a hard time figuring out when they move somewhere else versus just shut down. But we do track the ones that are coming in.
So in this presentation, it would be nice to see, how many restaurants moved in, how many restaurants moved out, how many stores moved in, how many entertainment related retail establishments moved in or moved out as well.
We are preparing that actually. We pulled those numbers last month and we're putting it in a format, so we would be prepared to do that relatively soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I think that now concludes your presentation. Thank you so much, Danielle. It looks like under miscellaneous matters, we do have a couple of people that wanted to present. So Yuri, are you on with AEDC?
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. Such a great presentation and conversation. I'll start there. I wanted to give a few end of year sort of bullet points of what we've done, but if I may comment on a few things, I was taking some notes too. Daniel and his team do a great job. The housing numbers were definitely staggering to me. I'll put it that way, right? We've grown about 75,000 people in the city, and we've only added, I think it was 9 or 10,000 housing units. So that bumps our average, I feel like, up to like 4 people per household, which is interesting. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
no, it's not. I'd be careful about too much of this. Some of this is when you're mixing and matching data sources, it's difficult. And so that's why Janine noted this was preliminary. We're continuing to scrub the data. Some of the council members have already touched on this. We think our data is probably better than necessarily what the census uses. I will tell you, as you heard, every year we prepare our own internal population estimate, and every year we kind of hound the Census Bureau to use our data so that they have accurate data in preparing their forecasts, and they typically just ignore us. So it's a challenge, but yeah, we keep very close track of our COs, and we did not have 9,000 housing units added over 2 years. It's a data source thing, so we can get you guys exact numbers on COs in terms of that, and same thing with the population, because when you go back, if you look at that chart, you'll see kind of in the inner census years, when you use ACS data, it kind of flatlines. And so what we do actually, and it's bizarre because the American Community Survey is actually also a census product, but they don't, it's like literally 2 halves of the Census Bureau that don't talk to each other. So the census folks actually produce another estimate in addition to the ACS. So it's confusing, but just know that yeah, their data is confusing, and I would say not as accurate as ours.
yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I was getting to that point. It didn't quite add up to me, and housing units even dipped down for some reason, right? Which we know is probably wrong. So anyway, but yeah, we've grown a lot. We've had a lot of housing, whatever that number is. And I think then to the diversity part of the presentation, I'll just reinforce that emerging industries and the industries that we have, and to Councilmember Lawson's point, we have about 5 of the 9 target industry clusters that the metro area goes after. So we have a good mix. We obviously don't have a few sectors like financial services and maybe the tech sector that go downtown or the tech center to open offices in. But we do have 5 of the 9 industries that the metro area sort of has as a diverse economy. And a lot of the newer industries that are coming in, we're seeing a lot of care about the diversity of our city and just general business. And they like the fact that we're 20% foreign born. We tout that a lot. And we're really proud of that. And it's a good differentiator for us doing our job. And then quickly on the education pipeline and education achievement levels, I think we've definitely made some improvements, and even our school districts have been, graduating more folks. I think our community college system does a great job. And to Councilmember Jurinsky's point, I think a lot isn't captured in between, right? High school and bachelor's and master's, right? We know we have a lot of engineers and skilled folks that have graduate degrees, but there's a lot of folks working here, and we've been working with AGC and other associations like Manufacturers Edge and CTA about what else people can do without necessarily a 4-year degree, and working still with Metro and CSU Global that do produce those 4-year degrees to really try to bridge some gaps. And something we have jumped on in the last about month or two since the news with all the tech companies with their layoffs, right? Whether it's DoorDash or Meta or any other folks here in the metro area. Robinhood, I heard downtown wasn't going into their office that they leased. We're talking to the aerospace sector because a lot of those folks have been talking for a year about how they compete better for that talent, because they don't advertise as well as technology companies do, because they can't, because they do secure, secret mission stuff that isn't just advertised. So we're connecting some dots there, and being we joke, a match.com between the aerospace industry and a lot of these tech companies that are laying off their folks, getting that information and making sure the aerospace companies that are expanding, and a lot of them are here, as everybody knows, are finding the talent that they need. And we just had a presentation, I know a few council members heard last night, from UCH's president of the Colorado Hospital. And, they're hiring Geek Squad Best Buy folks to work as technical assistants for nurses, right? And servicing the healthcare industry. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that we'll continue to see. I think the pandemic created a lot of it. I think we'll see a lot of it going into the future. So just wanted to comment on that. And then I just wanted to give kudos to the mapping resources that Andrea pointed out to. The GIS department at the city is top notch. We actually implemented and integrated a specific web portal map into our website when we launched it last year, and people love it. We've gotten great feedback about it and how useful it is. That it has a link to all of the other maps in the city, and I think a lot of site selectors and consultants and company project managers utilize those resources. I don't know if there's a way to track IP addresses and all of that, but I think we would see a lot of out-of-state visitors going to, whether it's our website and the city's GIS website, and learning more about the city. And because of all the great layers and through the legend, it's just a great resource, and we've heard great feedback about that. And then lastly, just to comment on the presentation, I think the recreational amenities and the 24/7 round the clock people being here, right? Not just coming in for a 9-to-5 job and then leaving, or vice versa. I think we'll be seeing some opportunities along the E470 corridor, as we've talked to some of the council members about over the last year, where we will get amenitized. We'll have more of a nightlife, if you will, and I think that'll attract a lot more people. I know that's not our wheelhouse, but we've certainly been in conversations with companies that ask about it, and so we're starting to have those conversations, and happy to be a resource if we can be on that. So jumping to what I really wanted to update you all on, we've had a great year. 2022 was definitely a lot of uncertainties, a lot of shaky ground coming out of more of the pandemic that we saw. And I know I updated everybody here at the beginning of the year, and that we were pretty confident and optimistic, and that's turned out true. Our deal flow is more than double the average of what it's been, and even pre-pandemic. So the deals we're bringing in, and it's a variety of companies, variety of industries, manufacturers, distribution, aerospace, tech, advanced stuff. And our pipeline is very full. We have about 90 leads that we're working on, about a dozen serious projects that we're, week in, week out due diligence on. And, that 90 number, that's a great indicator going into next year that a lot of companies still want to be doing a lot, and Aurora has a lot to offer. Well, we just obviously Port Colorado just announced that they're open for business. That's a couple thousand acres. Prologis just announced they're building 1 million more square feet. Sun Empire is developing 300 acres. We just heard of a couple other parcels of land being activated for next year. And I think a lot of it has to do with the continued demand and market interest in what we've been promoting with all of our industries. We're working also with Becky. I think I saw her on the call earlier to host a Korean delegation that's coming here in January. We're really excited about that. We've been working with a local ambassador and connecting with some Korean companies over the last year and a half. And they're really on the cutting edge of some technology and innovative advanced manufacturing kind of stuff that we'd love to get here. We're working with a couple more people on some renewable energy projects that are chasing the federal incentives that were approved earlier this year by the administration, and so we're seeing a great interest in that. And even with the uncertainties of the administration and what's going to pass in this session in the next 2 years with Congress and what happened a month ago with the elections, I think a lot of people are still confident that there's some resources that they can kind of lean on. I think they want to continue bringing manufacturing back to the country, and just at least if it's not bringing it back, it's at least the next phase of expansion for whatever company it is. We'll see the manufacturing stay here instead of being outsourced to Asia and other countries. So I think that's a positive. And then we're working with the city, and again, kudos to Janine's folks and the water department and everybody else on making sure infrastructure needs are being met out in the northeast section, right? And so we're definitely having great conversations with city folks about that and the private sector. We're wrapping up our almost year-long study with an engineering firm that we partnered with the city in Adams County with to kind of map out the routes and the phasing and the costs and the demands of water and wastewater. More importantly, even than water, I've learned a lot about wastewater that needs to flow in different directions because of certain basins and topography. And I know I'm getting into too many details, but we're getting close to getting some results for that. And so we'll probably present this to the next PD committee next year. And hopefully it's similar. And I don't know when those assignments get done, but happy to obviously connect with the members from this year's committee and then talk to the new members and have that transition, not lose any gaps. We also are working on film incentives at the state level. We're supporting a task force that was created by legislation that we supported and were part of drafting last session. And there's a task force led by Representative Herod and a couple other working with the film commissioner that works for the state's OEDIT office, the Economic Development Office under the governor. And they're really trying to expand that program. There's about $30 million of incentives available to companies that want to film here, build studios here, all that sort. Georgia's done a tremendous job. New Mexico's done a good job. A couple other states are chasing those deals. So just like the data center initiative that we've come with before, we just need to remain competitive with all these other states. And that's what we're working on to try to level up our commitment to that industry. It's great employment. It's great for veterans, actually. And it's actually, a lot of trades and a lot of skills translate from other industries that can go into the film industry. It's not just actors on a screen and video editors. There's a lot more that goes into it. I went to Atlanta to tour some studios back earlier this year, and it's just an amazing industry. They've built up over 80 studios in the last decade because their state legislature passed an incentive bill that said, hey, we'll cut your cost 20 to 30% if you guys come here. And it's created billions of dollars of economic impact there. So we're excited about that. We'll see where that goes this legislative session. And then lastly, really looking forward to the economic strategy that Janine is leading. We'll be at the winter workshop, I think, with all of our partners, talking about how else we can continue to promote Aurora in the best way possible and get all those demographics and statistics in a better place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Yuri. And Chance, are you on? Did you want to update us, or are you just telling us to read the backup?
You can definitely read the backup, but I can share a quick update. We just actually received our recertification values for the district, and I just wanted to share with the city and staff that the numbers are phenomenal. And when I first started 4 or 5 years ago, our certifications were just over 104 to 105 million, and I just received the letter, and it's 157 million. So when we talk about property values skyrocketing and increasing, and a lot of redevelopments and investments happening specifically along the Havana corridor with the transportation and multimodal, and of course the 2030 shopping centers as a destination for shopping in this region. You can really see that in the numbers. I know some of you and many of you, thank you to Councilmember Jurinsky for attending our last annual meeting. I know many of our stakeholders were really thrilled to be able to connect with council and the mayor, and also city staff to ask specific questions. So I just wanted to share that one number, and then if you guys could review the the minutes or the notes that I sent over, that would be great. The most highlighted ones that I wanted to mention was just, of course, Argenta. We've been talking about this in PED for I don't know how many years. It's been a part of Gail Jetchick's legacy and bids investment from the very beginning. But Argenta should be delivering their first 32 condo units by early January, hopefully, fingers crossed. And then some of the things I didn't share, we are going to be getting David's Bridal at Village on the Park and Nana's Dim Sum and Bow at Village on the Park. So those are kind of the two or newer leases. We have quite a few LOIs in our other shopping centers, so I hope to kind of announce that in January. But if anyone has any specific questions, please do reach out to me. We do plan to bring back events full force in 2023. Some new things like night markets and the Havana Street Global Market will come back. We have a movie night, Elf, a drive-in movie coming up on December 17th. So if anybody wants to join us, we'll be at Sam's number 3 for a drive-in movie. And lastly, I welcome all of you to attend our last networking event and roundtable tomorrow at Nile Ethiopian, December 8th, 3 to 4:30. We'll be hosting a retail crime roundtable. I know some of City Council, APD, and the mayor will also be in attendance, as well as the DA's office. But thank you all, and Happy New Year. I'm so grateful for everyone in this group, and thank you so much for the great presentations today.
Perfect, thanks, Jan. No one else has anything to report. The next meeting looks like it is scheduled for January 11th at 8:30. And like Yuri had mentioned, we are waiting for our new policy committee assignments to come out. So I don't know what that will look like, but I've already set the agenda for January, and I will work with whomever is the new chair and committee members for this meeting to make sure that that one at least stays intact, and I will still be attending that one since it's something very important to me. So with that, if I'm no longer the chair of this committee, it's been an honor. And I thank you, and Janine, thank you, for how hard you work on, economic development and planning in this city. So thank you so much, and to all city staff, and to, of course, my committee members. It's been an honor serving with you both. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Have a great day.